This is, again, chapter 41, Invertebrates, and you studied this last time. This is the big evolutionary tree of invertebrates, and the simplest invertebrate animal is a sponge, which is phylum Porifera. And what a sponge consists of is a whole bunch of different cells living together, and they have cells called collar cells that look like this that line the inside of the sponge, and they flap their little tails, their little flagella, and that pulls water through their bodies. And their bodies have these collar cells on the inside, and on the outside they have these epidermal cells that form a protective barrier. And they have these cells right here, they're called pore cells. Pore cells. Sponge joke. Anyway, there's pore cells, and the water gets pulled through the pores, and the water is filtered of any food that's in it. Are you with me, Gigi?
Yes.
You seem not to be.
I am here.
Water goes through these pores and out the top, and the water is filtered of any food, and there are little amoeboid type cells. They look like little amoebas, and they crawl around between the epidermal cells and the collar cells, and they deliver food to all the cells and keep the body clean of bacteria and contaminants. And they can even make sperms and eggs. And they can make these spicules, which make up the skeleton of the sponge. Has hard structures called spicules that make the sponge tough and hard for fish to eat and that sort of thing. So a sponge is like a big collection of a whole bunch of cells working together.
So it's like one step ahead of a Volvox colony?
Exactly. It's like, but the thing about a Volvox is, if you break up a Volvox colony, they can live on their own for a while and they'll swim back together. You break these up, they won't live on their own together for very long. They can, some types can reform into a sponge, but if you leave them separated for long, they'll die. How's that sound?
It's pretty neat.
Do y'all like sponges? SpongeBob? SpongeBob SquarePants?
He's a collection of cells.
That's what he is. He's just a collection of cells. And then a little bit more. Oh, by the way, when you're reading the book, do y'all ever watch the videos?
I did this.
You should watch the videos whenever you're reading. Helps you understand. The Cnidarians are the next group, and they're your jellyfish, your sea anemones, coral. Anyone ever heard of a coral reef?
Yeah.
Made of these things.
Polyps?
There's two body forms. One type is called a polyp, and one type is called a medusa. This is the medusa form. And the medusa form has a bell with tentacles hanging down. And the tentacles all have millions of these little stinging cells. They're called cnidocytes. Raise your hand if you've been stung by a jellyfish.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
It
hurts.
Have been stung by a jellyfish.
How do you spell cnidocytes?
Cnidocytes, C-N-I-D. If I can get it to move. Oh, here we go. Cnidocytes, there it is.
Okay.
Cnidocytes. What happens when you get stung by a jellyfish is one of these tentacles hits you. And each tentacle has thousands of stinging cells. And each stinging cell has a little harpoon that shoots out and sticks in your skin and releases a little poison. Now, if you were a little fish, only that big, it would probably kill you. And then the jellyfish would take you in and would pull you into its mouth.
Man of war.
Which, as you can see, the mouth, come on, there we go, up. The mouth is right there. And the jellyfish can pull in its prey.
Like a tractor beam.
And put them in the mouth. And this is just not working very well. Pull in the prey into the mouth and digest it inside this little space in here. And then what's left, what can't be digested, comes back out the same opening. So this is a very simple animal. Simple animals have just one opening for their mouth and anus. Both the mouth and the anus are the same opening. It makes them have really bad breath. It's a biology joke. And so that's simple. More complicated animals have a mouth and a separate anus, but not these. They're pretty simple. And there's no brain in this animal. It has what's called a nerve net, which is a bunch of nerves that are connected to one another, but there's no central brain. But these things are basically pre-programmed, and they swim around, and they can live and survive. And
Can they communicate in any way?
with one another?
Yes.
Yeah, they can. They have chemical communication. They can find one another and mate and that sort of thing. They do have separate males and females. And the males will squirt sperm into the water, and the females will squirt eggs into the water. And that's a form of reproduction, extra cellular, what's it called? It's spawning is the term. External reproduction instead of internal. So those are pretty cool animals, and the Medusa form is the bell on top and the tentacles hanging down, and then you have a form that's called the polyp form, which looks like this drawing I have here, which is the organism often stuck to a surface with the mouth here and the tentacles going up.
Oh.
And that's a sea anemone.
Yeah.
You ever seen a sea
I
anemone?
used to have it in my aquarium.
Yeah. And that's also a cnidarian. It's related to a jellyfish. And what a coral is are these things right here that build shells around themselves.
I have been stuck.
They secrete a shell. And then another one will grow right next to it, and it'll also have a shell. And if you put together millions of these things, you get these hard shells that are real huge, real long and wide, and can make up what we call a coral reef. And these little things, they tuck themselves in the daytime and stay down in their shells, and at nighttime they come out and stick out their tentacles and they feed.
They hurt if you touch them.
Yeah, they have stinging cells. Just
Fire coral.
They're like jellyfish.
Fire
Yeah.
coral is very painful.
Yeah, they're like jellyfish.
So what are the flame cells?
Mine doesn't cut.
Or what were the flame cells again?
Okay, so flame cells are in the next organism.
Oh, okay.
The rock bit you, William. You shouldn't be arguing.
No, I know. I got bit by a rock.
Oh, you need to know about symmetry? These cnidarians have what's called radial symmetry, which means you can cut them in half and get equal halves. But there's many ways these things can be cut in half to get equal halves. You can go this way, or that way, or that way.
Like a pizza.
It's like a pizza. As long as you go through the middle, you'll get equal halves. But the next thing that evolved in animals is called bilateral symmetry, where you have to cut down the middle to get equal halves. There's only one place you can cut and get equal halves in a bilaterally symmetric animal. Humans are bilaterally symmetric. The only way to cut us in half and get equal halves is right down the center. If you cut me in half that way, it's not going to be equal. This side will be different from that side.
Like a beetle.
A beetle is a good example right there. Right down the middle, and you get two equal halves. And so the first organism, the first type of animal we see that has this type of symmetry is called a flatworm. And these are more advanced. This was the next advancement in
2.0.
animals. What's that?
2.0. Animal.
Exactly. Animal 2.0. I guess it's 3.0 if you consider peripherence. But anyway, these things are bilaterally symmetric, and it has a head and a tail. So the head on the front and the tail on the back. My mouse is acting up. Head on the front, tail on the back. And they have a brain. These things evolved a brain, so they can do some thinking, not just reacting and reflex. And they have eyes. The first thing that evolved, eyes. Jellyfish didn't have eyes. Sponges don't have eyes. So these things can sense light and dark and react to it. And they swim around in the ocean and in the water, and
Can be parasites.
Live their life. Yeah, some can be parasites inside of organisms. You can have flatworms. They're called flatworms. You can have them living in your gut. You ever heard of a tapeworm?
Yes, sir.
That's one of these that has evolved to live inside someone.
It just thrives on the digestive system of the human.
That's right. Yep. These things evolved an excretory system. This is what you're asking about, Adam. A flame cell excretory system. And what it is, it has little cells. And under the microscope, it looks like a little flame flickering. But what it is cilia that push the wastes out through holes in the side of their body. It's like they pee out the sides of their bodies. Constantly peeing out extra wastes in water. They're taken, because a lot of these live in fresh water, water will get into their bodies and they have to excrete it. It'd be like if you were drinking all the time, you have to pee a lot. What?
Reverse osmosis.
Exactly. Yeah, they got to get rid of that water.
Is that active transport?
For a cell. It is in a cell, but in them, we just refer to it as an excretory system. So that's the flatworm. Those are, they have a cool thing. They have regeneration. Have you ever heard of that?
The starfish.
If you cut them in half, it'll grow 2 new halves. And you can go from 1 to 2. And
asexual reproduction.
Yeah, that's a form of asexual reproduction.
They'll even grow their eyes back.
Yeah, they'll even grow their eyes back.
Dang.
Wait, where's the brain?
The brain is right here.
So they'll grow a whole new brain?
Yeah.
If that tapeworm or flatworm needed a friend, it'd be easy.
Yeah, just cut himself in half. What's that?
Does it ever die?
Yeah, if it doesn't have enough to eat, it'll die. If it doesn't have enough water, it'll die. So they can die.
How does it cut itself in half?
Well, they don't cut themselves in half, but
cut it in half.
if something came out and took a bite out of it, like in the middle, and the head got away or the tail got away, it could grow a new half to it.
It's like a lizard.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, it can regrow. And then the next step, animal 4.0, is the evolution of a complete digestive system with mouth on this side and anus on this side. Food goes into one side, goes all the way through the worm, comes out the other. These are called roundworms. And roundworms are usually microscopic. There's millions of them out there. They live in the soil. They can live inside creatures and be parasites. They live in the water. They live in the mud, especially at the bottom of the ocean.
That's so weird.
You ever had your dog have heartworms?
Mm-hmm.
That's a roundworm. Or pinworms. You ever hear that? Babies get pinworms. Those are roundworms. They live in your gut. And another thing these things evolved was what's called a coelom, which is a body cavity. Can you say coelom?
Coelom.
All at the same time?
Coelom.
Loudly so Mr. Temple can hear you?
Coelom.
Okay, pretty good.
And what is that?
A coelom is a space. It's a big long space inside the body. An open area. We call it a body cavity. And organs can fit in this space. And it's highly adaptive because animals can become very complicated once they get all these different organs. So these creatures are even more advanced. They got a mouth, an anus, and a coelom. So we're starting to get
More complex.
really complicated. You want to see some video footage of all these creatures?
Yes, sir.
Let's start with...
Would we possibly have a quiz
Sponges.
on this tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, that could happen. Video footage of sponges.
We're going to go back now to Cape and the exploration of the Coelom Wall. Kate's pilot is Gary, and inside was this one material and a cameraman.
Excuse me.
So like a waterproof cage.
So we vent at this time.
We gonna vent now?
We're venting now.
want to look
Now
at
this
the
wall
sponges?
outside is the Coelom wall. This is this slope of these submerged mountains. There is actually one mountain that is 5 miles high. So we're talking really Himalayas under the sea. It's getting very blue out there. Definitely got darker. It's also got a little bit colder. You can feel the temperature difference.
Willis. Can I touch the basket?
This is incredible. Now we've gone through that area where the corals are, through a quite bland, rocky area, and now we're in the wonderful world of the sponges. Look at them! We're about 300 feet now. And the reason you get this belt of them down here is they're not dependent on sunlight in the same way that those corals are. So here they have no competition, they can just flourish. They become these incredible shapes. What they're trying to do is stick themselves out from the rock as far as they can into the current to grab their food. Now what they eat is called marine snow. It's basically kind of dead bodies and poop, I'm afraid to inform you.
Who?
They work a little bit like, well, they're kind of like swimming pool filters. And there's an amazing fact I read that 1 cubic centimetre of sponge can filter, effectively pass 20 litres of water a day through its system, and it will take out all those nutrients and then just flush out the water it doesn't need. They're amazingly efficient feeders. I don't know whether you can see just below me here, but there's a thing which is about the most appropriately named thing you can imagine. It is called an elephant ear sponge. And look at that. Isn't that just massive? How big do you think it is, Gary?
About 9 feet tall.
9 feet tall. Look at it. It's just extraordinary. We're leaving behind the sponge belt now, continuing our descent, following the marine snow that the sponges haven't managed to grab on its way down, and we'll see where it settles next. Where we're headed is for the haystack zone.
How cool is that? Big old sponge.
No.
What am I doing after
So those are sponges. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and such.
So polyps are dependent upon light?
Well, the coral are, because coral have, living in their shells, the coral have algae.
Oh, is that why they
That's why they're always shallow.
Sea anemones are cnidarians with a polyp body plan. Their flower-like appearance is deceiving. The tentacles surrounding the mouth have stinging cells used for capturing prey. Jellyfishes are another class of cnidaria. They have a medusa body plan and typically swim by rhythmic pulsations of the umbrella with their tentacles dangling beneath the belly. The tentacles are armed with stinging cells.
What do you think of that?
Cool.
What about flatworms? You ever seen a flatworm?
I have not.
thankfully no?
It is in flatworms like planaria that we first see bilateral symmetry and cephalization, localization of sense organs in the head region. A pair of ocelli, light-sensitive eye spots, are located toward the center of the head. Lobes extending from either side of the head contain chemosensory cells.
They're like its nose.
Planaria feeds using the protrusible muscular pharynx. The chemosensory cells on the lobes are used to locate the food. Through rhythmic contraction of the muscular pharynx, planaria pumps the food into the gastrovascular cavity with a siphon-like action.